let me hand over to our guest moderator, Jocelyn Ho. Jocelyn, would you like to unmute yourself and join today's discussion? Thank you so much for hosting. Over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, everybody. It's been an interesting, it's an honor to be here, actually, to be on a panel with three really brilliant women, and all with very specialized experience in impact investing. So whilst you are filling out the poll, what I'll do is I'll just go around quickly and introduce everybody. So first of all, we have Melissa Fu. She is the Vice President of the Malaysian Business Angels Network. The fun fact about Melissa is that she's actually a dentist by training, and that eventually, you know, her interest in creating impact and in the healthcare industry has then evolved into now she's an investor and a portfolio manager, investing in healthcare and women-led companies. So welcome, Melissa. Secondly, we have Jan Lee. Jan Lee is the founder and managing director of Seatrine Capital. Another interesting background is that Jan Lee is a biochemist with an academic background in biochemistry. Similar to Melissa, you know, she throughout her career, she aspired to create impact. She spent some time working in an NGO, and now she is an impact investor with also a specific focus on healthcare and education. We also have Li Hui. Li Hui is the head of Purpose Capital at Social Ventures Hong Kong, where she oversees investments in portfolios in social ventures, including fundraising initiatives and social impact measurements. Li Hui was previously an investment banker. It's quite interesting because when I first met these ladies, I automatically assumed that everybody was an investment or finance background, but it turned out actually most of us are not. So it was an interesting finding. And just quickly about myself, similar experience. I was an environmental scientist by background. Back then, sustainability wasn't really a thing. That might kind of give away how old I am, but as the conversation has evolved in the space and with corporates, now I've transitioned my role to consulting, so working with companies to improve their sustainability performance. So now that you guys know about us, okay, the poll has come in. It's a pretty even breakdown with the majority of us not really involved in the space, but wanting to know about it. Okay, good, that's good. We have a few startups and one investor, and then others just wanting to understand the topic. Okay, great. So the last 6 months has been really interesting. For me, having worked in sustainability, this whole COVID-19 situation hasn't really made the demand for sustainability gone down. In fact, we're seeing more and more demand for this, especially with the corporates that we work with. And I get the sense that it is the same with impact investing, that, you know, the current situation in the world is not actually the demand and the amount of investments being made in this space is not decreasing. The GIN, which is the Global Impact Investing Network, issues an annual survey every year. And this year, what they found is that compared to last year, the amount of assets that are invested in impact investing has actually increased from 502 billion in 2019 to 715 billion in 2020. And that is a 42% increase. And this is based on a survey of 1,700 impact investors that they speak to every year. So the increase is quite significant, despite the situation that we're seeing. So I guess then my question is, and it goes back to the topic of this webinar, which is, you know, what role, how much, what is there to lose, or is there a trade-off to impact investing? So I guess then my question is for the panelists is, you know, what is the alpha impact investing? Because a lot of times people think, okay, if I'm investing in impact, am I giving out financial returns? But with the uptake that we're seeing, maybe that's not the case. So perhaps if you guys could share with us what you think the alpha is in impact investing. Maybe we start with Melissa, because I see her nodding quite a bit. Oh, Melissa, I think you're on mute still.
Yes, let me just unmute myself. And you can hear me now, Jocelyn?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think this is, I nod because it's a journey that I've been through as well, because, when I first started out in investments, most of my investments were pretty much early stage technology investments. But as you mentioned, my background in healthcare has kind of drawn me to looking beyond the financial numbers and to see what sort of impact that, these investments are making on the world. So I think to answer your question, I mean, there is a lot of research out there, I think, about the alpha, or how we can get additional return, or where the returns are in impact investment. But I'm going to answer it a little bit from a personal experience. So I think what I noticed about the investments that I made, or as I tried to be more impactful in my investments, is that I became drawn to founders in these industries that were extremely passionate and committed to improve their sector, So we mentioned, I mean, other than healthcare and education, I also invest in microfinance and environmental sustainability. And I can think just off the top of my head of a few founders that I've invested in. It's actually, the company is really grown because of their extreme commitment to creating a positive impact, right? And when I compare this to some of the technology or innovative investments that I used to make, not to take anything away from them, but there is something very different in the founder and in the management team when you make an impact investment, in how committed they are to the vision. So I think that's where I see the biggest difference, and I think that has led to a lot of growth and growth that I'm proud of to see in the investments as well.
That's really interesting, actually, especially about the part about investing in the founders, and maybe there's some sort of like value alignment that you have with them as well, and what their mission and purpose is. I think that's really important. What about, I'm going to pass the same question to Jan Lee. What do you think, Jan Lee? Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I guess I kind of agree with Melissa. So impact investment has emerged for quite a while now, I think more than a decade. And there has been a lot of debates whether there's a trade-off or not. But based on my personal journey, I've just started not long ago, I think 1-2 years ago. But there are actually a lot of case studies in which you can borrow from other impact investors across the region, ASEAN, that it's proven that they can make both financial returns as well as impact. And aligned with what Melissa has mentioned as well, like when we talk to a social entrepreneur or an entrepreneur with a mission-driven company, they are very different from the typical entrepreneurs. They will have to have both the profitability mindset, the business acumen, as well as the true intention to do good. So the intention is what makes them a bit more grateful, I would say, a bit more resourceful in achieving what they want to achieve through their business. Yeah. So I guess that's what attracts our financial and non-financial support towards these individuals with great passions to do good, as well as making money for the better good as well. Yeah.
What about you, Li Hui? What are your thoughts from your perspective, having been an investment banker before this?
Yeah, so I guess the way I saw it was that having made the transition from very traditional equity investment to impact investment, is that building on what Jan said about the intention. I think I'll actually give a more specific name to that. That's humility. I think a lot of not just the founders, but a lot of the management people, or a lot of the people who work in the teams, we see that they have a very strong sense of, like justice, social justice, wanting to make this world a better place. I think that's where we find a lot of the alpha, because they are very willing to get their hands dirty and, open up new frontiers where I would say more conservative investors might not dare to go. So like when we invest in enterprises that deal with women from difficult backgrounds, Then people will say that, oh yeah, but what if they don't show up to work? What if they have this problem or that problem? But we are willing to go and do that. We are willing to put in the hard work to help them through. And that will kind of also lead us towards a more successful path. So I think is that humility and what Jen said, the intention, I think that makes us, a bit more daring to go where other people were not dare to go. Yeah.
Yes. Sounds like there's that value alignment just carries throughout, just making sure that we are helping those that are trying to do good, essentially. Okay, so we have our third moderator has just joined. Hi, Surya. So just a quick introduction on Surya, just because we didn't get to her. So Surya is a managing partner at Missions and Company. She's an impact advisor and investor. And again, similar to Melissa and Jen Lee, she was actually in the healthcare industry, or she was come from a science background. So actually she was a surgeon prior to her investing journey. Hi, Surya.
Hi, everyone. Hi, sorry, I had some technical challenges joining, but
No
great to be
worries.
here. Being part of the panel.
Actually, you came over a great time because I was just about to go into my next question, which is about a discussion about like what the impact investing landscape is in Asia and how does it differ in other markets? Because I know that you're based in Switzerland, if I remember correctly. So perhaps we can give this question to you as to start us off what you see as the differences, and it can be in regards to themes, it can be in regards to financial returns.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Just to correct you, I'm not actually based in Switzerland. I'm just in Switzerland right now for some.
Oh, apologies.
I'm one of the kind of remnant victims of the COVID lockdown. Kind of stayed on this end of the world. I'm normally based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but yeah, I can speak a little bit about the landscape that I've observed in Asia and some of the differences in other regions. I do a bit of work with this global community called the Global Steering Group on Impact Investment. And the purpose of that group is really to grow the ecosystems around the world for impact investing through a focus that drives action and awareness at the country level. As a whole, I think there are about 36 countries now that are part of the national advisory boards of the Global Steering Group. And we are working on building, in fact, we have a task force now in Malaysia. What we have noticed in terms of the difference between the different markets is that there seems to be a lot more readiness in Europe and Africa to embrace impact investing. And in Asia, a lot of what we have seen over the last, I'd say I've been working in this field for about 5-6 years. It has been a slow, but of course, steady shift from traditionally looking at philanthropy as a means to drive impact. And then slowly this kind of embrace of venture philanthropy, and now shifting further along to impact investing. Largely though, we've noticed that philanthropy organizations are still, in Asia, I'm referring to, are still not willing to make the full shift to impact investing. Perhaps because there's also, I wouldn't say a lack of understanding, because I do believe that many of them do understand the principles of impact investing when compared to philanthropy. But I think there is a lack of acceptance as impact investing being something suitable to be managed under, for example, a philanthropic foundation, be it corporate or family philanthropy. And so there are only a few that are really willing to experiment, to try in small measures how to connect an impact investing approach to their work in creating impact. I think what's positive in the Asian region, though, is the increase in interest in investing in businesses that have a social purpose, but that can promise market rate or above market rate returns. And this would be a range of businesses, big and small. So I would say the primary driver when we're looking at the landscape in Asia, when the term investment is used, is that market rate return piece. And if businesses want to be part of this slowly shifting, but for sure growing ecosystem, being able to tangibly communicate about your impact without sacrificing the sort of financial returns and the business approach that you would normally apply anyway in managing the business or in seeking investments. I think that would be the way forward for a region like Asia. Thanks.
Thank you, Surya. Melissa, I know you spent some time in the US as well doing this. So what are your takes on this?
So I think there's two sort of ways to look at impact investment, and one of it comes from an investor first perspective, where that was what a lot of what I did in the States, where we worked with investment institutions and financial institutions to allocate capital to impact. Between where the investors are in the States and the investors are in Asia, I would say that there isn't too much of a gap. I feel like in some ways, a lot of the family offices and institutions, financial institutions in Asia have are quite on par with where the States, with the conversations that is happening in America regards to impact investing. I guess investment is very global, so the knowledge kind of is quite well dispersed or disseminated. Where I see the gaps is in the philanthropy side. So with when I worked, I went to a lot of philanthropic sort of events, and I think the philanthropic capital in the States, and the organizations that work in nonprofits are a lot more open to the idea of impact investment and allocation of capital in that segment than what I noticed in Asia. I think in Asia we have a lot of large foundations and corporate philanthropic institutions, but the conversations and the awareness of impact investment here, probably there is a bigger gap there. And a lot of my role working in in the government in Malaysia as well has been to try and create more opportunities for philanthropic capital to access or to actually understand what impact investment is and how impact investment can be a tool for nonprofits to achieve the impact that they want, and not take away anything from the mission or the whole spirit of the setup of the foundation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, because I did spend some time working at an NGO myself, and I got the sense, and it was in Asia, it was in Hong Kong, and I got the sense that there was this lack of willingness to work with corporates, because it was like, we were an NGO, we're not for profit, we don't like for profit is almost in a way perceived as not as good. So which brings me to the next question, and we touched on this a little bit. So what are some of the misconceptions about impact investing that maybe NGOs or impact investors or just the general public that they might have, and how would you go about challenging these misconceptions? I'll open this one to the floor.
Okay, maybe I'll go. So I guess basically a lot of the times many people may think that impact is an additional component to a business rather than impact being embedded within the business itself. So for example, if you think about mission-driven companies, there are so many different types of models in which you can have impact as a notion of additionality. You dig out X amount of percentage, you do good with it, but it's very different when you have impact embedded within your business. So if your business grow, your impact will grow directly. It goes hand in hand. So for example, the more you sell, and if your clients happen to be your beneficiaries, so then the more you sell, the more impact you create. So I guess there's a lot of the different types of social enterprise business models in which many social innovators can explore. But I think I'm just speaking from the perspective of Malaysia, is that a lot of the Malaysian social enterprises perhaps may focus more a lot on employing their beneficiaries within their value chain, in which then a lot of the public will then think, oh, that's what a social enterprise is, and that's it. Whereas if you were to go to different countries like Europe or the US, whatnot, the spectrum of how a business model of an impactful company can work out is very different, and it's very varied as well. It depends on how innovative the entrepreneur is. So I guess that's something where we need a lot more case studies, examples, role models to kind of showcase to people, hey, there's actually this supplies of mission-driven companies in which they may be impact ready and investment ready.
What about Li Hui? What do you think? What are you seeing in Hong Kong?
Yeah, so a lot of investors or funders that we meet, they seem to think that the financial return and the social return are separate, and they always think, most of them usually think of them as trade-offs. So if I want to make more money, I will have to do less good. That is the kind of the flow of the conversation that we have been getting, and I think we've spent a lot of time trying to educate people that they are not mutually exclusive. I'd like to raise the example of one of our funders. They're called RS Group. They are a family office in Hong Kong, and they're one of the first investors to go what they call like a blended value approach. So to them, when they look at their return, it's they look at it as a whole. They call it a total portfolio approach, where the impact and the financial returns sit side by side and have equal importance. So I guess that's also a kind of recognition that what comes with your financial returns, there is some opportunity cost as well. So if we just chase the financial returns, maybe we're not just neglecting the impact, we are also creating so-called bad out of that. So I think I would like to encourage people to, try to move away from a very purist black and white mindset that it's either or, but I don't think this is something that we can achieve overnight. Like we look at a lot of the financial measurements that we have today, they took like decades or like more than 100 years to mature. We are very new in that sense, in terms of these kind of like measuring the impact or seeing how it translates into something more tangible. So I would say, I think we should all just keep an open learning mind to see collectively how can we, better define impact so that we can move away from a black and white world to one where, we are comfortable with the uncertainty and the kind of like fluff, if you may, in the more intangible things.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned, they're not two separate things, right? Impact and then what you're doing. And for me, that's the same with us. It's like for businesses, like sustainability is not an additional thing that sits separately. If it's embedded, it's very easy for you. It becomes part of your DNA. And it's interesting to hear that is the same with the impact investment space as well. Li Hui, you mentioned a little bit about impact measurement. And I know that, if traditional investing is very easy. You measure your, ROI, you know how much money you make. You can calculate a percentage, but for impact investing, I think it's not so clear, right? It's not as clear. Some people value impact more. Some people might value financial returns more. So from your perspective, you guys as investors, like, what do you look at when you're assessing, an investment or startup you're investing in and the returns that they generate? Like, how does that work?
For us, actually, because we are not professional investors, I guess we are a blend of like an inventor, incubator, and investor. So I guess we are not so how should I put it? We don't like, let's say, benchmark or do indexes and things like that. I think, so one thing that we are trying to move towards is, instead of impact measurement, is something we call impact experience. Because a lot of the times we feel that when I first started at SPHK, you know, we came up with this whole entire kind of like indexing numeric system to measure impact. And then we realized that, you know, there was something missing from there, and that was the human story and the human side of things. So right now what we do is that we do encourage, we do, of course, you know, like do the very basic kind of numbers. How many people have we lives touched, lives impacted, you know, how many hours of this, how much, what's the opportunity cost, what's the waste saved, things like that. But we also encourage a lot of our funders and investors to come down themselves and see, you know, what change are they making, and then they would feel it for themselves. But in terms of, you know, going back to a more kind of like academic way of looking at things, we have a system, we call it IMPACT, impact, which is how we assess our corporates and the kind of projects that we do. So it basically, so I is for innovation, M is for market, P is for people, A is for alignment, C is for continuity, and T is for transformation. So we want to see basically from the social side of things, the business side of things, and from the people side of things, whether or not you have the right kind of resources to make your idea work in execution. I think if of the 6, if we had to pick one that is really important and one that excites us, I think the one that's very important is the people, whether or not the entrepreneur or the team, they have the passion and the dedication to carry it through. Despite all the challenges. And the exciting part would be the transformation. We want to see beyond your project, beyond your business, can you create a ripple effect in society? Can you have a systemic change that would make, let's say, the government change their minds on certain issues? Or can you inspire people to think differently on a certain issue or about a certain community? We feel that in that way, you can leverage your existing resources to make a bigger splash in society, and we don't have to keep pumping money or other resources in just to scale up. Yeah.
If I may jump in here, I think, and if we're talking particularly about a market in Asia, the biggest opportunity I feel, based on people I've been working with and what I've observed, is actually to shift the focus away from impact investing being seen as traditionally investing in social enterprises. I've been working in, I mean, my organization is a social enterprise too. And I've been working in supporting social enterprises to scale their social innovation ideas. And also invested in early stage social enterprises in Southeast Asia. My observation, though, in the last, I'd say 6 years of doing this, is that the growth in numbers of social enterprises in the entire region is not going to be able to keep up with the growth in interest, and certainly the capital that is available to be unlocked or tapped into. And I also feel that for the most part, the social enterprises in Asia are not ready to accept the type of ticket sizes that some of these investors are looking to park, to invest. And so I think where the opportunity is really in Asia is the growing field of ESG investing. And particularly in the last, I'd say 6 or 7 months, I see some questions already coming in. What are kind of post-COVID opportunities? Well, let me remind us all that COVID is never going to be a post event. It's going to be with us forever. And we'll be getting other pandemics too happening in the future. But certainly, yes, if we say the post-acute response, you know, recovery phase, there's this term going around right now called build back better. I think a term that's kind of competing with build back better, because that's implying that we're just doing what we did before, but a bit better. That's a new term that's called build forward better. And I think that is where the opportunity is, to bring in a stronger social element of the ESG framework that investors already accepting and using in their investment decisions. You know, the number of ESG funds that have been launched in Asia is growing. New financial instruments that refer to the ESG framework also, you know, that's growing. I think really in the region, that's where the shift is going to happen. You look at countries like Malaysia and Singapore and Hong Kong and the Philippines, where, you know, the regulators are trying to drive the growth of the social, you know, socially responsible, ethical and investing field through the ESG framework and also in alignment with the SDGs. I think we're going to be seeing more businesses be mindful of the S component, you know, the environmental and the governance that's easier to measure. The S is not, but that's where I think the opportunity lies in this region.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a little about how we look at impact, and I think I think where Lê Hui is sort of like where maybe we aspire to be in terms of measuring impact. But one of the things that I've noticed as in just starting the impact journey is that we actually can just start with portfolio or capital allocation. So that's where I sort of like thought about it, right? I looked across all the investments that we had and the industries where they were allocated, and I thought, let's review, you know, like who or which companies in what sectors have been you know, have we been allocating our capital, and then how can we be more intentional in putting more in certain industries versus the other. So I agree with Dr. Shariha in that sense. You know, we look beyond social enterprises. I think social enterprises are a good sort of like place to look at in terms of seeing where which sort of sectors have the most issues and problems, and then, you know, how can we grow and scale. But we also look at companies that really larger companies that also work within that. You know, I think some of the things we mentioned are microfinance and also food security. So there are a lot of social enterprises, but also later stage companies that work in that sector, and that's where we've been sort of like thinking, how can we allocate more capital into those industries and those sectors. Yeah, so really, I think that's how we measure our impact at the moment. I wish we could do a whole lot more, but it's about capital allocation for my side. Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting because we touched on a bit, you know, it's not traditionally is viewed as something that is for social enterprise, but really that definition is changing, right? And that definition is evolving. And this is something that I'm seeing as well in regards to just sustainability in general. Like traditionally it was philanthropy, it was volunteering, but now it's really about embedding that lens into your value chain, into everything that you do. So I just wanted to ask you guys, like, how would you redefine it? Like if you were talking to somebody and they don't know anything about this, and they don't have the misconception of, you know, this is a social enterprise thing and it's, you know, about employing your beneficiaries, like how would you explain it to them in maybe 1 or 2 sentences what you think impact investing is and how you would define it?
Maybe I can take yeah. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Lê Hui.
Yeah, I'll take a quick stab. I think we should, if I were to describe this to somebody completely new, firstly, I would say in terms of investing, let's broaden, or let's have the idea that what you invest doesn't have to be just money. It can be any type of resources or expertise or networks that you have. Like even the person you know can be something you can invest in. So why don't we think about it this way? What resources do we have, and how can every resource we have be put to a good use and have a social purpose behind it? Yeah, Melissa?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think for me, I think it's actually, there's still two parts. So you can think about it as an investment and then like allocate your capital in impactful sectors, or you can come about it from an impact first point of view, which is where I think we're trying to go to, where we think about what impact we want to create, and then we think about the financial instrument later. So for example, if we are from a foundation and we want to create impact in terms of employment opportunities or financial empowerment, then what would be the financial tool that we would use? Would it be an investment? Would it be a grant? Would it be a loan? Would it be some form of debt? Would it be a combination of all of those? And I think for me, I feel like that would be what an impact fund would truly encapsulate, where we put the impact first and then we think about what sort of financial tool that we want to use to get that, right? So, there's always two ways about it. If you're an investor, go with the investment strategies, and then if you're talking about the impact, then perhaps we can put the investment secondary to the impact we want to create.
Yeah. If I can just add, I think would like to bring in the notion of ecosystem approach. Like Melissa said, there's different people doing different things. Philanthropy might be giving grants money. Investors might be making investment through equity, through bond, through convertible notes, whatnot. And government might be accrediting social enterprises. So if all these different components within the ecosystem, then if you were to imagine the life cycle of a social enterprise or mission-driven company, from the minute that they're breed, ideation stage to validation stage to the funding stage and then later stages. So then there is just different people, different ecosystem builders, be it entrepreneurs or whoever that has resources that can contribute in one way or another, then that's gonna support them along their entrepreneurial journey in achieving the impact that they want, as well as the financial returns that they want as well. So aligned with Le Hui, where resources are, there are resources out there, but how do we maximize the usage of all these different resources by different parties in the ecosystem, be it small ticket sizes, big ticket sizes, what financial support or non-financial support, as long as they are all along the journey. I think that's the way forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like
so
the point.
I'd like to jump.
Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to jump in here. I agree that there needs to be this ecosystem approach because also the level of readiness of different parties needs to be accepted and addressed. And certainly that availability of capital across the continuum. So, when we're talking about impact investing, that's just one type of, I guess, asset class, a type of approach. And across the continuum of capital, there are many other ways for you to mobilize capital for good, right? And being able to coexist with the other types of capital that is out there is very important if we're looking at building a stronger ecosystem as a whole. But ultimately, it's also about acceptance that, you can't make philanthropic organization become an impact investor if they're not ready or willing to, or because it doesn't align with the principles of the establishment of their organization in the first place. But it's a matter of accepting that, okay, well, they have a role in particular types of investment projects, perhaps also in de-risking project at initiation stage, or in financing the pilot, or in looking at particular aspects such as capacity building, research, etc., building knowledge. And then it may be that further along the line, the continuum of capital, there might be investors that would want to come in either at a later stage of that same project, or to address other aspects of the project which the philanthropic organization cannot and will not cover. Now, the other thing also is, I mentioned earlier the opportunity I see in Asia, where, the potential of investing in public markets, basically, I think is where it's at. And certainly the IFC also launched a report in June highlighting that this is where they see also a potential, but I mean, they were looking at it across the globe though. And if we're looking at the current pools of capital, it's about 500 billion to maybe 700 billion, depending on how you define it and what you're measuring, which also includes, by the way, development finance institution, capital investments, because they are primarily driven by the impact, right? The development piece. But if we're looking at the lens of the opportunities that could be tapped into in public markets, then the size of this market could potentially be also around $2 trillion. So, ultimately, it's a matter of what lens you're using to look at things. What are the kind of frameworks and guidelines, and there is also, by the way, a parallel movement that is growing and getting on board some of the traditional impact investors, but also new parties, is the impact management project, where they're trying to standardize some of the measurements that are being used and try and tailor it to be able to be applicable across this continuum of capital and organizations that exist in an ecosystem. And one more thing also, that the GSG group, one of the things they're working on is advocacy to bring in this impact weightage in how companies are declaring their annual accounts. So this will be of interest to companies like KPMG, PwC, et cetera, who are doing the accounts for a lot of these companies, and how you bring in that impact weightage also as both a risk assessment, but also in terms of accountability, transparency, connected to the governance piece, right? What impact are you creating in society matters also, in how you're managing your people, your supply chain, and all the other factors that you can relate to the social piece of the ESG framework.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting to see that as well, asset managers, even just like very traditional Chinese asset managers, starting to think about this, wanting to understand the why they need to do this. And also then comes, okay, then like, once I do it, like, how do I measure that this is successful and this is actually generating something that I wouldn't have generated otherwise? So it's a really interesting time right now, and I do think the momentum will keep going. So I guess then I want to start moving towards the discussion towards like what's to come, right? Because we mentioned this before. Other markets are slowing down because of the COVID-19, but sustainability, impact investing is not. So there's got to be something that's happening that's bringing this momentum to life. So what do you see as the factors that are really driving this positive momentum in the upcoming few years? I mean, I think that
perhaps.
Yep, go ahead, Li Hui.
Oh, sorry. Perhaps I can share. So I think yesterday I saw that the UBS released a new report called, so their regular report called Investor Watch. And yes, the latest version was talking about what are people's priorities now that we are in this COVID world. And also, I guess, for the Hong Kong context, because we have been facing like almost a year of social movement. So according to their statistics, so 86% of people said that their priorities are now staying healthy. And 86 said protect their family. 80% said spend more time with their loved ones. So this kind of gave me a clue that as investors or as people in this market, maybe we're looking towards things that are more kind of like human-centric, human-based. We want to cherish the kind of bonds that we have with other people. We also see that increasingly, we are one humanity. So I think a lot more human-based services will come out, whether it's like healthcare or is it employment for the less privileged, or having employment that is more resilient, or even I guess now that the borders are shut, we are looking a lot more at the local economy and local community. How can we have more circular and hopefully more environmentally friendly systems coming out? So I think that's where we see a lot of these more community-based and eco-based ideas might gain more traction.
Anything else anybody would like to add to that? I absolutely agree with that too. Melissa?
Yes, sure. Yeah, I echo what Lei Hui said. I think a lot more humanity. Maybe the trend is because people are starting to realize a lot more about how important society is, right? I mean, the pandemic or viruses don't spread on they use people as a vector to spread, right? So that means that the health and safety of not just us, but our family and our community actually contributes to our own personal health and safety. So we can't just be individual in our thinking anymore, because what community does around us kind of affects us as well. So I think that has come up a lot. And the second thing also is the financial crisis that kind of like comes on the back of the health crisis, right? That we start to see just how there aren't as many safety nets for people who can't work for a certain amount of time because of the lockdowns. So I think these are the two, I mean, for me, I feel like this would be where I'm looking at, throughout the pandemic, that's where I've been focusing a lot about efforts and new investments to look for financial inclusion, also things that allow access to, things that allow like certain parts of society to have more financial knowledge and access, and the next, of course, healthcare is the obvious one. We've been looking, and I personally feel that healthcare is always very undervalued. I mean, there should be an impact premium for healthcare, just because of how important it is to society and our lives. So I think for me, the two that I've been focused on in the last few months in my investment searches has been the financial inclusion and sort of like healthcare and improving and digitizing healthcare as well. So allowing it to be a lot more seamless and not so hard to sort of like access. Yeah. So two thoughts from me.
Thank you. Jan Lee?
Yeah, I guess in addition to the demand side, in which the different innovative solutions that's more apparent these days, is that the supply of capital side as well, because I'm also from a family office. So I see a lot of my peers, a lot of the second generations are generally a lot more thoughtful, or they care a lot more about sustainability, impact, social causes, a lot more than the previous generation, in which they might value finances a lot more because their mode is survival mode. For ours is we want to do good. So then with this supply of capital matching with the ongoing more and more need for this, whatever Le Hui and Melissa have mentioned just now, all the different innovative solutions to solve the problems, I think if there's a match to it, then the ecosystem will continue moving forward. It has been rather slow previously. I'm not sure if it's right to say this, but I think COVID is going to push it a bit faster and further. Yeah.
Thank you, Jan Lee. Anything else to add to that, Sariha?
So, yeah, indeed, it seems like there's a lot more capital that is being mobilized to respond to the kind of human development and social opportunities that have arisen because of the pandemic. But I would say largely though, there's not been so much new instruments, if you know what I mean, new capital pools, new funds. It's just the mobilization of existing pools. That's what we've seen, at least in the last 6 months. And a lot of that is also in connection to businesses that they already have in their investment portfolio to address some of the social aspects from, employment arrangements, supply chain disruptions, etc., from the pandemic. Now, the other thing that I think is interesting is to not forget that governments are impact investors too. and also, you know, some of the large pension funds and you know, wholesale funds also play quite a big potential role in growing this field. And the question is, you know, again, coming back to this ecosystem approach, how can you have an ecosystem where all the different parties, whether it's on the supply or demand side of the capital, or even the intermediation of the capital, and also market builders, how can they each have a role in growing the ecosystem as a whole without necessarily having to change their own practices or maybe to adopt one or two new ones? That's the important question, because if we're going to have to wait for everyone to be aware about impact investing and, you know, feel convinced that they are part of the movement, then it's going to take time. Whereas some of the things that need to be addressed require a certain degree of urgency. So I don't know, I believe that it's perhaps more efficient to be able to work and accept you know, what the limitations are for certain organizations, and to see whether or not you could actually bring in, instead of changing their entire investment strategy, just saying, well, you know, perhaps this is a lens for you to view either the risk of your investments or you know, to look at how you're reporting on the impact of it, right? So we need to be open to that, because I don't want us to go into this, oh, we've got to make everyone an impact investor, and then it's going to take years and years and years, whereas some of the things, you know, that need to happen already now. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. So we just have about a few more minutes left, but I just have one more question I'd like to touch on, which is, you know, we've talked about this conceptually within the last year, but are there some real life examples that we can kind of hear about from your experience? I know, Li Hui, you worked on one with the Hong Kong airport. And working with them and helping them contribute to more impact. And just to give the audience a little bit of like, okay, then I have all this information, how can I actually put this into practical use, or how can I start thinking about it in a more practical way?
Yeah, so I think, just a quick introduction on the Hong Kong airport case. So Social Ventures Hong Kong, we worked with the Hong Kong International Airport and the Airport Authority of Hong Kong to help them to work together with the 20-odd business partners who operate in the Hong Kong airport to find opportunities to hire more people so that the airport can grow. I mean, obviously now it's at a standstill, but before, you know, it was growing pretty well. So we helped them to identify gaps where they could hire manpower from local communities with like youths who are looking for opportunities, maybe can't fit into mainstream society, ethnic minorities in Hong Kong, and as well as stay-home mothers who want to find a second career after their children start in primary school. So I think for this, what we saw was that they had a very good look at their business and saw the gap there. But instead of using a very business solution, they actually looked towards a community solution for their business problem. So for everyone who's here on our webinar, I think maybe we could just look at our own work as a start to see, okay, what kind of things do we want to change, or what's our pet project, or where our kind of like our heart really lies. And I think that would give us some clue as to, you know, how we can start to contribute, because I think we need to see where the demand is, and then as Jen said just now, then fit in the kind of resource to do it. So I think that it requires a lot more self-reflection, whether from personal level or from a corporate level, you know, what kind of role that we want to play in our society. Yeah, thanks, Jocelyn.
Yeah, from my side, I think we invest in in a range. So like the earlier stage ones and then the later stage ones. So as I've mentioned earlier, I think one of the later stage, one of the investments that we've done is in agriculture technology. So that's actually more tech and innovation sort of a place. So we look at like how to mobilize capital to fund innovation in agriculture. So one of the earlier stage ones, or which are sort of more closer to home, is one that allows financial inclusion for the migrant and refugees, migrant workers, actually not refugees, across Malaysia and Singapore as well. So so these are some of the investments that we have made, and I think those would be some of the examples of sectors. But the later stage ones tend to be quite broad, so they are by industry. But I think microfinance, and also another actually a social enterprise that promotes more environmental sustainability and in the circular economy. So that would be like the social enterprises that we have invested in.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Li Wei. Okay, so I'm conscious of time. We're at 5 right now. Thank you to the panelists, first of all, for helping us understand what all of this means and how it's been evolving so much in the last 6 months, 1 year, and then also making it real for us. So before we wrap this up, I believe we have one more question we wanted to ask the audience. So Michael, perhaps I'll give that to you to pull up the final poll question for the audience, to get an understanding as to, do you guys agree with this statement?
Yeah, so this is the second question, really, rather than the first one, because we looked at that at the beginning of the webinar. So for those who are still on the call, and obviously I think the Q&A question that came from Jennifer, that was kind of answered by Sharia. We were looking at sort of what current post-COVID investment opportunities do you see, and can you share any specific examples or case studies? So we've talked a little about the Hong Kong airports one, and some of what Melissa's family office is invested in. Now we have still Carl Heath, who's down in Australia at the moment. And Carl, I don't know, Carl, if you want to, I can unmute you, allow you to talk. Are you able to talk, Carl? Are you there? There you go, Carl. So Carl has a project which is quite interesting, which you might want to share, which I do believe is impactful in terms from an agricultural point of view, which would marry into what Melissa was talking about. Carl, do you want to just to give a quick brief of that project, and maybe a little bit maybe of something that's going on in Vietnam as well from your own background? Carl.
Cool. Thank you very much, Michael. Hi, ladies. So the project we're involved, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah, one of the project we're involved in is an ag tech startup business. It's a Singapore company, and it's it's basically designed to improve animal welfare. And so this computer vision we can weigh, count, and assess the health of animals, and consequently remove the human contact as much as possible from the supply in the manufacturing of the production. So we're currently seeking investment for that. But one of the questions I had was really for a startup company. Where do we go to put these type of opportunities to the family offices? Is there a platform, or do we just have to go and door knock?
Thanks, Carl. Maybe I can jump in. Nothing beats having that contact with potential investors. And so, yes, door knocking, you cannot exclude that. But there are also platforms that exist, and intermediary organizations are important in playing this role of connecting potential projects with, businesses seeking funds with those who are providing funds. And I think the role of intermediaries has sometimes not been appreciated as much as it could be in making these connections, because they're closer to the ground, they understand the landscape, and they know also in terms of the credibility of the team, and because sometimes some of these teams have been through their own programs. There are platforms abound. It really depends on what sort of ticket sizes you're looking at, Carl. So maybe we can connect separately on that. And you know, again, coming back to what I mentioned earlier about, maybe I forgot to mention multilateral agencies also going into the space. But yeah, development finance institutions, multilateral agencies, depending on the size of your project, you might want to also explore organizations like the World Food Programme, or you know, even UNDP are going into impact investing now. So so it really depends size of your project, how much you're looking for, and where in the world.
Currently engaged Beanstalk in Singapore, and they've been advising us. So it's in regards to Vietnam, we haven't had that. I'm based in Vietnam, although I'm stuck in Australia, like other people. Waiting to get back to Vietnam. What's the appetite, and do you have much contact with this type of investment in Vietnam?
Jocelyn, are you seeing Jocelyn?
I think it might be easier to connect bilaterally about that, Carl.
Okay, sure. I'm just curious about Vietnam, where you see Vietnam in the marketplace. That's okay.
Maybe Jocelyn might want to comment from a KPMG point of view. I mean, are you hearing anything under the ASPAC of KPMG, this sort of move yet, or is it too early for an economy of Vietnam?
I think it's still a bit early for us. Yeah, it's still a bit early for us for Southeast Asia. I think momentum is picking up in like Hong Kong, China, Taiwan. There's more discussions happening, but from a Southeast Asia perspective, yeah, at the moment, not so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Carl, I might almost suggest that, you know, I'm not sure if you're pitching this as an impact project, because as Jocelyn said, I think if you were to position this as an impact investment, perhaps the understanding of what an impact investment is may not be where it needs to be in say, Vietnam, or, you know, even in Malaysia, I'm sure. But as an agriculture or ag tech investment, I'm pretty sure that, you know, you would be able to connect to the right investors. And I do echo what Shariha said. First of all, I guess, Jen, how do you get your you know, referrals? Is through the network, so refer to us, and also monitor, I guess, the community players. So I think family offices which invest into early stage do monitor a lot of the you know, the accelerators and all the different industry intermediaries out there. I mean, that's where we get the deals from. So you know, through there you should be able to get access to the investors that you need. Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Okay, so, Jocelyn, we got the result of that second question. I think there was a few less people willing to vote, but it pretty much came across as a strongly agree statement. So heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. I mean, obviously there's an opportunity here now with the last sort of 5 minutes to go to the attendees further if they'd like to raise a question or raise their hand if they'd like to talk. I mean, we've got Jeff Tucker there, and we've got David Armitage, and Adelena. We've got board members here on the call. I don't know if any of them would like to raise their hand. Jeff, would you like to speak?
Hi, guys.
Oh, hi, Jeff. Go ahead.
Hi, Mike. How's it going?
Yeah, very well. So Jeff is based at the moment in the UK, also stuck due to COVID. Spends half his time in Thailand.
Yeah, it's just to say, Mike, and the whole panel there. It's yeah, I'm pleased to see, first of all, the concluding statement. You know, the strongly agrees. You know, says it all really. it's, you know, I've been working in this arena for many years, and it's taken a while. It has been a slow burn, but we are getting there. But I genuinely feel that there is going to be a setback in all of this. We are going to see a return to a certain extent, I think, of the bottom line. I think some investments, some impact investments are going to be outvoted in many respects by some boards, and it takes a strong board to really push things through. And all I will say is the best companies will always prevail, and I hope it does prevail. But COVID is definitely going to have an impact, and it's you know, I don't know how much of an impact. Let's hope it's not too much, but I think we all need to be prepared for that, if that's not stating the obvious. I just wonder, does anybody else agree with me?
No, Jeff, I think you've got a fair point, actually, because we're doing, for those who are still on the call, we are actually going to be launching with together with EBAN, the UNSCAP and PBEC and KPMG, an ESG sustainable finance report in the coming few days. So look out for that. That will be posted on KPMG and PBEC's websites. But some of the findings from that, and even some of the discussion points, was about the strength of boards and the ability to delegate. You know, there's a lot of visionaries who have idealism, but then the delegation part and then the actual implementation and deliverables is not always followed through, because the incentives are not necessarily fit for purpose further down the chain. So with COVID in the mix as well, I do agree, Jeff, that there will be this managing of expectation, for a better word, of how fast this is all going to happen. Because I think from a social impact, you know, there is definitely pressure for, you know, communities to be supported. We mentioned about these human factors, and health is top priority now for everybody. But there's a lot of capital flowing around, but it's still, you know, a capitalistic market and a world that we live in, regardless of good intentions. So let's see and hope that the global institutions that are supposed to govern and abide by this will be able to do it, given the geopolitics that is going on as well around the world, which is causing a lot of uncertainty. So it's an election year, and these discussions have that backdrop. So I think we need to keep that, the political, unfortunately we are an independent voice for business, but we can't get away from the political intervention part. So thank you guys. I mean, I don't know if there's any, you had some closing remarks, Jocelyn, so just maybe you want to finish that off to close us out for today. But just as I mentioned, we have the report coming out in the next few days, so look out for that. And I do implore those who are listening in for the first time to get connected, even if you're maybe a non-member today and joining us to listen in and learn about this subject matter. Please do follow us on LinkedIn official page, where you'll see a lot of posts now, and I'm pushing that hard. So if you've got anything you want to share, I'm happy to look at it and share it on its merits. And you know, we're a connectivity network, as has been talked about, an ecosystem, if you like, of connectivity and opportunity. So as Carl's mentioned, he's looking for potentially some investment opportunities for some of the stuff he's working on. There's also people selling things and looking to buy in other sectors as well. And that's where PBEC is, in some ways, a bit of a conduit for connecting buyers and sellers, as well as the work we do at the government and APEC level. So keep that in mind. We're not just a think tank per se, we're also a connector for business across the APEC 21 member states. So Jocelyn, closing remarks, and we'll call it a day. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Actually, I think you did a really wonderful job summarizing everything. So I won't keep everybody here for too much longer. Thank you again for the panelists. Thank you for everybody for being very engaged in this conversation. And let's keep in touch, and everybody stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining. That ends our session for today. Thanks, guys.